There are stories where justice is simple. Someone commits a crime, the law responds, and balance is restored. Those stories are clean. This is not one of those stories. This story begins with a promise that never should have been made in the first place to a crime that could never truly be punished. Somewhere in imperial China, a magistrate ordered the arrest of a tiger. And somehow, against all reason, the order was obeyed. In Zhaocheng, a small county town resting between worked farmland and low wooded hills, there lived an old woman more than 70 years of age. The land there was neither fully wild nor fully settled. Fields pressed up against forests, and narrow paths ran between terraces and trees. She had only one son, her livelihood, her protection, and the thin line that kept her fed and sheltered. The hills beyond Zhaocheng rose gently at first, then thickened into forest, where sunlight thinned and paths blurred. One morning, the woman's son walked into those hills as he had many times before. By nightfall, he had not returned. The truth reached her slowly, carried by whispers and fearful glances. A tiger had taken him, swiftly and without hesitation. Grief hollowed the woman from the inside out. She cried until her body shook and her voice failed, until living itself felt heavier than dying. Days passed without food or rest, yet grief did not quiet her. It sharpened her into something rigid and unyielding. At last, she went to the magistrate of Zhaocheng. The courthouse stood as a symbol of order, wood, stone, and scrolls meant to impose meaning on chaos. She demanded justice, not comfort, not charity, justice, delivered by the law that claimed authority over every life within the county. The magistrate listened, then he laughed. He asked how she imagined the law could be enforced on a tiger, an animal that neither understood statutes nor feared punishment. His amusement echoed through the hall, sharp and dismissive. The woman did not leave. She wept, pleaded, and knelt hard on the floor until the court itself seemed to bend around her persistence. The magistrate scolded her. Guards shifted uncomfortably. She ignored them all, as though her grief had placed her beyond shame or fear. At last, unwilling to drive her away by force and eager to end her cries, the magistrate promised her something impossible. He promised that the tiger would be arrested. The words were meant as release, not fulfillment, but once spoken, they could not be taken back. Even then, the woman did not rise. She remained kneeling until the warrant was physically written, stamped, and placed in her view. Only when the promise became ink and paper did she leave the court, her grief momentarily contained by formality. The magistrate turned to his attendants and asked which of them would carry out the arrest. Silence followed, thick, deliberate, and heavy with the understanding that no one dared to take on this task. A court messenger named Li Neng stepped forward. Now, he was gloriously drunk, his balance loose, his judgment obviously dulled by wine. Grinning, he waved a hand and said, "I'll do it! How hard can it be arresting a tiger?" The words spilled out easily, the kind meant to vanish by morning. The warrant was issued at once. When Li Neng sobered up the next day, regret set in. He assumed the order had been a performance, a gesture meant only to quiet an old woman's grief. He did not understand that spoken promises, once sealed, developed weight of their own. The magistrate refused to let the matter drop. Days passed, then more complaints arrived, and the woman's grief became an embarrassment the court could no longer ignore. The warrant had been issued, the promise recorded, and someone had to be made responsible. Li Neng was dragged before the magistrate, reminded of his drunken boast, and beaten until the words he had laughed through began to feel permanent. Ordered to make good on what he said, Li Neng was sent into the hills. Desperate, he gathered hunters and searched day and night, calling out into the forest that answered only with silence. A month passed without success. The tiger never appeared, not once, not even as a shadow. Each failure was answered by the crack of a bamboo staff, until punishment became routine rather than warning. Li Neng's back split and healed badly, split again, his strength thinning with each passing day. Hope did not vanish all at once. It simply retreated, becoming something distant and theoretical. Broken and with nowhere left to turn, he went to the Chenghuang Temple in the eastern suburb. This was a place meant to meditate between the human world and forces beyond. There, he knelt before dim lamps and worn stone, praying not for success, but for escape. He wept until his voice cracked. Without warning, a tiger walked into the temple. It did not rush or roar. It crossed the threshold calmly and sat in the doorway, framed by shadow and incense smoke, as if it had arrived in response to something unspoken. Terror froze Li Neng in place. He believed he was about to die. The tiger paid no attention to him at all. Gathering what courage remained, he spoke aloud, his voice shaking as he said, "If you are the one who killed that woman's son, then lower your head and let me bind you." He cast a rope over the tiger's neck. The tiger lowered its ears and did not resist. Bound by a simple cord, it rose and followed Li Neng out of the temple, its obedience more unsettling than its violence would have been. The tiger was brought before the magistrate. Officials stiffened. The magistrate questioned Li Neng, questioned the hunters, questioned the circumstances, anything that could turn this back into an ordinary case with an ordinary solution. Then, the magistrate ordered the courtroom cleared. Alone, he sat with the warrant in one hand and the law in the other. If he followed the statute, the tiger would be killed. That would satisfy the written rule. But it would not change the fact that a 70-year-old woman had lost her only son. Execution would end the spectacle, not the problem. The magistrate went back and forth between punishment and consequence, between law and what the law could not repair. At last, he set the papers down and made a decision. The tiger would be released. When the magistrate opened the doors, he spoke to his officers, he spoke to the record, he spoke to the limits of what a court could do. The tiger's cord was removed. The magistrate ordered that it be driven out of town and that no one interfere. The decision landed like a stone, heavy, final, and hard to justify in words. When the old woman heard what had been done, she was furious. She believed the tiger should have paid with its life. She cursed the magistrate's weakness. But the next morning, when she opened her door, a dead deer lay carefully placed before her home. She sold the meat and the skin and bought food. The next day, it happened again and again. The deer were not mangled or half-eaten. They were offerings set down with a strange restraint. In time, it became routine. Sometimes the tiger brought more than food. Coins, bits of silver, small valuables dropped quietly into the yard. The old woman's life changed from bare survival to unexpected comfort. She became rich, and the care she received was greater than what her own son had ever been able to provide. Her anger softened into something complicated. The tiger began to appear at her home, sleeping beneath the eaves or behind the house, sometimes remaining for an entire day. It gave no cause for fear. In the village, people learned to pass by without running. After a few years, the old woman passed away. With the money she saved, the family held an extravagant funeral. As relatives stood by the newly raised grave, the tiger rushed in, sending them fleeing in terror, then went straight to the grave, roaring like thunder across the valley before disappearing into the hills. In time, the people of Zhaocheng built a shrine in honor of the faithful tiger, not because it was innocent, but because it fulfilled a duty no law could command. Stories like this survive because they refuse to resolve neatly. They leave you alone with the question of what justice really means and what counts as payment when nothing can truly be repaid. If you enjoy strange, mythic stories drawn from old texts, you can support Jared Tells Tales by liking this video, subscribing, or even better, become a member by clicking below. Members receive early access to stories and help this channel survive. And if this story unsettled you even slightly, leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you in the next story.